I'm Action News Jack's first alert meteorologist Trevor Gibbs. Today is May 17th, which means the Atlantic hurricane season is not that far away. The official start June 1st, and a common topic of conversation regarding the hurricane season is the development of an El Niño, which is very likely to occur later this year. And that starts in the equatorial Pacific. We often track sea surface temperatures in this part of the world, and as trade winds blow, typically from east to west, a lot of times that pushes warmer water towards the central and western Pacific, but sometimes those trade winds relax, and so that's when we see those warmer sea surface temperatures compared to average over this region, and that would be the El Niño phase of the El Niño Southern Oscillation. The opposite would be the La Niña phase. But that has implications on weather patterns across the globe. When we have an El Niño, the subtropical jet stream is shifted a little bit farther to the south and is very active over parts of, say, the Gulf and the Caribbean. That increases wind shear across the Atlantic, which typically leads to less hurricane activity. And so what are we looking at right now with sea surface temperature anomalies in what we call the El Niño index area here in the equatorial Pacific outlined in that red box? Well, you see a lot of yellows and oranges, which is warmer than average, and it's getting warmer with time. And so this graphic here, put together by the Climate Prediction Center, a sub-agency of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, shows that over the next several months, it is very likely we're going to see that El Niño develop. And that's what you see here with the red bars, especially as we get into May, June, July, August, September, October, and lasting perhaps even into the upcoming winter season, November, December, January. Now, in terms of how strong that El Niño is, it's also likely that we'll see a strong El Niño with far above average sea surface temperatures in that region that I just showed you in the Pacific. And a very strong El Niño is indicated here by the dark reds, and you can see there is some probability for that. But I do want to highlight what you see here in this text. I'll make it bigger for you. Stronger events do not always mean bigger weather and climate impacts. Stronger events can make it more likely that certain impacts could occur. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of what to expect for this upcoming hurricane season. Early outlooks are forecasting a near or slightly below average season in terms of named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes. Always want to say, though, it only takes one storm to make it a memorable year. Locally in Northeast Florida, Southeast Georgia, we track our wet seasons, and an El Niño year typically gives us a slightly drier than average wet season, only by a little bit, though. But in the winter, things get more active. So locally, when we have an El Niño in Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia, that gives us a slightly drier wet season. Doesn't mean we won't see heavy rain this wet season. We certainly will, which we so really need with the drought. But typically, on average, we see less rain when you add it all up in an El Niño year. We also see less hurricane activity in the Atlantic, typically in terms of the number and frequency of storms. But I put that asterisk there to remind you that it only takes one to make it a bad year for any particular location. So that doesn't mean at all you need to let your guard down. And if an El Niño persists into the fall and winter, which is likely to occur, that gives us in the southeast an active fall and winter, as that jet stream overhead gives us plenty of wind shear when cold fronts come through. We will likely have several rounds of thunderstorms with some severe weather, which is very typically seen across our area during an El Niño year.